Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. What do we got today, Rick?
We're talking about some players you should not draft.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's happening, Fantasy Champs? My name's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always.
What's up?
As you could see from our the name of our episode, or on YouTube on the thumbnail, this is do not draft player time. We did a bust series.
It's a little different.
This is a little bit different than the bust series. These are guys that were just straight up not drafting. So, what were you gonna say? Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's pretty much it.
Oh, okay. All right. Before we jump into our do not draft players, check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter at the FFChamps, on Instagram at thefantasychampions. You like us at facebook.com/thefantasychampions. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platform, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with your friend. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe there as well. Click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below players that you're avoiding for the 2020 fantasy football season. Rick, tell them about the draft guide.
Guys, have you purchased the draft guide yet? Well, you should. It's only $25. It is live, so if you buy it right now, you can go right into it. It's got full rankings. We got breakouts, we got busts, player draft values, player breakouts, or player breakdowns, and so much more. Make sure you guys tell your friends about it. That
trophy I just showed to you, that's what you get if you win a championship. Hopefully, if you have a fun league.
I mean, if you have a fun league.
If you have a fun league. Also, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools inside the app or online that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other major podcasting platforms. You can also make money from your podcast with a no minimum listenership. It's literally everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So to do that, be sure to download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So let's jump right into the don't draft these players list for us. And I'll start with AJ Green. Now, you were kind of hesitant on this.
Yeah.
So, obviously, you can share your disagreements. But the reason why I haven't been drafting AJ Green, is because I think there are plenty of guys around where AJ Green is going that would lead me to believe that, they're just other options. So, I would rather take a Terry McLaurin, a DJ Chark, I don't know who's around those two guys.
I know you don't like him, but Devontae Parker, Cortland Sutton.
Yeah, so I'm like even those guys. Like I would rather take the youth and the exciting player over AJ Green, and that's not the only reason why I think I'm not drafting him in general, but. That just to start, like I think there are just more valuable players around him to the fact that I think his name is just like if he was a 7th, 8th rounder, I would be on board. But I think that just the fact that his ADP is so high, it's all because of his name. But the ADP is so high, it just makes it hard for me to want to like draft him. But that's not just the only reason. The second thing is that he's freaking injured all the time. The last 2 seasons, he's missed a whole season. And then he missed half a season, the season before that. This year, he doesn't start off camp well with a hamstring injury. And he honestly has so many issues with his... he's so injury prone in a lot of different ways. So it's like, I don't know that he's going to be able to, have a chance to... like produce the same way that he has already produced in the past. So for me, I look at AJ Green and I think his injury problems, his ADP, and the fact that he is 28 years old. I think all of that's just going to lead to issues for him. So, I mean, in the long run, it comes down to figuring out if AJ Green can actually have a productive situation. in Cincinnati, but I lost you, Rick, for a second. So.
I know. I was like, what the heck just happened? I could see you moving, but I couldn't hear you.
But anyway, yeah, so I rambled on about AJ Green for 5 minutes, not knowing what I was saying, trying to figure out how to get you back. But anyway, so yeah, injuries, ADP, and the fact that I think he's a little bit older. Sure, the opportunity's there, but I just don't think, I think there's so many, not only those options or those situations are there, but you also have the fact that Cincinnati is still not, even though Joe Burrow's there and their offensive line is slightly improved and there's some decent things there, like Joe Burrow is still, like, he's still young, and that offense still kind of blows. So it's like, they're not going to go from being one of the worst offenses in the league to one of the best offenses in the league automatically. It's going to take time, and I just don't think AJ Green has any of that left. I don't think he has time. So I think people are going to reach for the name, and they're going to get disappointed. So I'm just not drafting him because of that.
What I'll say about AJ Green,
about 5 minutes.
I don't hate him, but the thing is, like, the wide receivers going around in his area, I'll just say this guy or Green.
Right.
Diggs or Green. Stephon Diggs or AJ Green.
Stephon Diggs.
Terry McLaurin or AJ Green.
Terry McLaurin.
Hollywood Brown or AJ Green.
Hollywood Brown.
That one's closer to me, but yeah, I'm with you.
Yep.
Cortland Sutton or AJ Green.
I mean, the opportunity is going to be there for AJ Green more than it is going to be for Hollywood Brown, but I think Hollywood Brown has a chance to break out. So
I think he's got touchdown upside as well. Yeah. So Cortland Sutton or AJ Green.
Cortland Sutton.
Devontae Parker or AJ Green.
Devontae Parker.
Brandon Cooks or AJ Green.
Brandon Cooks.
Michael Gallup or AJ Green.
I would take Michael Gallup.
Yeah, and then probably Debo or AJ Green.
I would take Debo because of the upside.
Yeah, so now we're going into like the 8th round. Here.
Yeah, it's
Will Fuller, AJ Green. Now,
that's where I would get kind of like even. I'd even out.
Right. So yeah, he's just about 2 rounds too early, honestly, because he's going in the 6th round.
But that's the name value.
What'd you say?
It's the name value.
Right. And you said he's got opportunity. I don't know how much opportunity he's actually really going to get. I mean, he's going to get opportunity, but not as much as I think some people think with Tyler Boyd there. John Ross returned to practice, and I guess was looking really, really good. A.J. Brown left practice because he got injured again. He had a hamstring injury.
A.J. Green, you mean?
Yeah, who did I say? A.J. Brown?
Yep.
Yeah, I meant to say A.J. Green, sorry. He had a hamstring injury in left practice. So yeah, and there's also T. Higgins there. So, I mean, even though I don't think he's going to do too much, he's still like the 4th option and will get some work. So, and Joe Mixon will get his targets as well. Gino Bernard will get some targets. So, like, I mean, unless the Bengals throw the ball like 650 times, I mean,
right.
I don't know. I think AJ Green will still get some work when he's healthy. But that's when he's healthy. He's going to miss at least probably 3, even if a healthy season for AJ Green, he's still going to miss 2 or 3 weeks. He's not going to play a full 16, I don't think. I just think there's other guys on the board that I would rather take.
He's kind of similar to T.Y. Hilton to me in that context.
Sure.
Just that, obviously situations have changed for T.Y. All these guys are both very talented wide receivers. They've been good over their career. Yeah. Is there a chance that AJ Green gets opportunity in that offense and ends up being really good? Yes.
Sure.
But you're looking at 2 seasons ago.
He's super talented.
You're looking at 2017 AJ Green and going, that can happen now. And it's it's been 2 years of him dealing with injuries left and right. He never completes a full season. And yes, when he's on the field, he's good, but there's so many things are against AJ Green that it's just I can't buy him. I'd rather have the youth and the upside from the guys we just referenced than have AJ Green, who's an old man. Does he even provide a good floor like Bob Woods?
No, I don't think he's on the floor like Robert Woods does.
Yeah. I just, that's a guy, don't draft him. Just avoid him altogether. It's not worth it.
Unless he falls 3 rounds.
Yeah. The second guy on our list is Le'Veon Bell. We're cruising through these. We might have time to talk about Baker. Let the cat out of the bag.
Yeah.
But so Le'Veon Bell, interesting situation. Last year, he was one of our busts. Sure thing he did bust. That was, he busted last year. But this year, I put him on the do not draft list because last year I was like, he's going to bust, but should I draft him? I tried to trade for him a couple of times just because of the opportunity.
You don't want him in the first round, but right.
Right. I think a lot of people were like, especially last year, like there's so much opportunity. It's the same thing they're thinking this year. He has so much opportunity for Le'Veon Bell. I think we're going to have some issues here because Adam Gase is an idiot.
That is,
First off,
very true.
Adam Gase is a complete moron, and they signed Frank Gore. And I would initially think that Frank Gore is not going to take reps from them, but more recently, I'm going to pull up Roto World so I can actually get the quote if there is one.
I was going to bring up the same thing. I think
so
that you're going to pull up.
Let me look it up. But Frank Gore, they said they're going to basically utilize him in that offense to get Le'Veon Bell off the field. So Rick Simony, I don't know how to say your name, bro, but he works for ESPN. He reported that the Jets' offense's plan is to lessen Le'Veon Bell's workload by utilizing Frank Gore. Basically, the only thing to keep Le'Veon Bell in the situation where he could produce enough fantasy points to be relevant was his workload.
Right.
Because even when he was with Pittsburgh, he was not an efficient running back. He was 0.7 fantasy points per opportunity, sometimes 0.68 fantasy points per opportunity. That was in full PPR leagues. That was like in a full PPR league with those situations. The big thing that he was getting was 380 touches.
Right.
He was almost touching the ball 400 times, and that's why he was finishing as the RB1 a lot of years. And when he was, really good and in Pittsburgh. So, but that's not the opportunity he's going to get with the Jets, and that showed last year, and that was one of our points of why he was going to be a bust. If the workload lessens even more because of Frank Gore, it's not going to mean good things for Le'Veon Bell.
No.
And
even if he's slightly more efficient than he was last year, if he's got less workload, then it's not going to matter.
It's not going to matter at all. So that's why I'm not drafting him at all. I'm staying away from him. I know it's a cute pick. You have a big name, and it's like, wow, that looks really good. But if he was in Pittsburgh, he'd still be a top first round pick. But because he's with the Jets, he's completely worthless.
Last season, or Adam Gase said that last season that he used Le'Veon Bell wrongly or like poorly.
Yeah.
And he wants to change it this year. And he said like he wants to pace it out better with Bell, which is good in theory, and it's good for like the team, but that just means he wants to give Bell less carries.
Right.
Bell's still going to, like, obviously Frank Gore is not going to steal the starting job for Bell. Bell will be the starter, but he's not going to get the same amount of work that he was getting last season. And it's still a crappy offense. It's still a crappy situation.
Yeah.
I feel much more comfortable with Bell in the fourth round, but where he's going right now on Sleeper, he was 29th overall.
Yeah.
Which, and in a lot of like our home league that we did, I think he was the first pick he was the second pick in the third round or something like that. Second or third pick in the third round.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's going in like the middle of the third round in pretty much every mock draft I've done, which to me is just too early for a guy who's probably not going to get, the workload that he needs to produce those kinds of numbers. I think he will be more efficient this year than he was last year because he was just so bad last year that I think with a healthy Sam Darnold, a slightly better offensive line and maybe a better usage of his work, that he can be more efficient. But it's not going to matter with the amount of work that he's going to need to be a low-end RB1, high-end RB2 that you want to draft him as.
And I think the other thing that people are kind of just completely disregarding at this point is Le'Veon Bell is getting older. You know what I mean? And he's
for
not...
Sure.
He's
for running back as well.
For a running back, 28 years old is definitely a lot older. And it's like there are guys... usually in the third round in drafts, whether it's 10-team, 12-team, or 14-team, you usually have a third round running back who's young and can break out. Aaron Jones of last year. This year we don't have that. I have not seen a running back in the middle round, not in the middle round, but in the third round that can do the things that you would anticipate a younger running back to do.
It was Clyde.
It was Clyde. Clyde was going to be the guy, and then he ended up a first round pick. So. But this is what goes to draft strategy and why I think this is probably the best year that you could ever think about going 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds. I don't think there's a situation unless you're a top 3 pick in the draft. You know what I mean? You're probably not going to get it. You might get an Aaron Jones if you're like first, second, or third in the second round.
Yeah.
But
if you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're a first, second, or third pick to start the draft in the second round, when you get back to your pick, what is that, pick 21, 22, 23, 24,
Yeah.
your best option is going to be Aaron Jones or Austin Eckler. So unless you're in those spots, you don't really have the same opportunity. But anyway, unless you had any other thoughts on Le'Veon Bell.
No, I think we can move on.
Okay. At the tight end position, we have Austin Hooper. We talked about him on the bus show. I want to reinforce it on the Do Not Draft show.
It's just
We'll
stay
reiterate.
away.
I think a lot, like the name value is putting him in like the 8th round for tight ends, and it's really, 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 really stupid to draft him. And I don't. This is not for me. I'm gonna give you the facts. You're not stupid for believing in a player. So I have players I believe in that other people don't believe in. Kenyan Drake is my guy, and he will always be my guy. And there are some people who just hate Kenyan Drake, and that's fine. I'm telling you, I'm going to give you the facts on why you should not draft Austin Hooper this year. It's simple. Austin Hooper is in an offense that doesn't throw the football a lot. Kevin Stefanski, coming from Minnesota, he did not throw the ball a lot in Minnesota. He's not going to throw the ball a lot in Cleveland. If Cleveland, even if Cleveland does throw the football a lot, they still have Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, David Njoku, who they didn't get rid of. Kareem Hunt is probably going to be a slot receiver. and then you still have Nick Chubb there, and it's like where does Austin Hooper fit into that outside of just his blocking? You know what I mean, in terms of receiving. Right. So don't look at last year's numbers with Austin Hooper and think that that's just going to translate now to Cleveland, right? So for me, it's going to be a lack of passing opportunity for the entire offense. Like, this is why I'm not super hyped on Odell. Like, I would love for Odell to have a really great season, but because of how much they're going to pass it, I don't see a single receiver getting over 120 targets on this team, especially not Austin Hooper. I think if there
is one, though, it'd probably be Odell.
Probably be Odell. But Austin Hooper, I would be happy if I was an Austin Hooper owner and he had 80 targets.
And, I mean, we've talked about...
But that's like, what is that? Like tight end 10?
Yeah, not even 80 targets. That's like...
I mean, tight ends don't get a lot of targets. Don't get me wrong. If you look at the top
targets they don't,
tight
but
ends,
still.
We just lost you on the YouTube channel. My camera died and no battery left, so you can't see my face anymore.
Well, you can hear our voices still.
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that would be around like the tight end 10.
Yeah.
Tight end 11. In that range.
Yeah. I mean, it's tougher for me. I think when you're talking about in drafts, like when we did our mock draft yesterday and you drafted Hunter Henry, I feel like you're safer drafting more talented guys in the 7th, 8th, 9th round and drafting skill positions than drafting, a tight end to fill a spot. Because I feel like a lot of people, when they draft, like we had our home league draft, like we said on Tuesday's show this past weekend. And there were people who were literally drafting just to fill roster spots.
Yeah.
All the way until later in the draft.
A mistake.
And I'm like, you don't do that. You like, I don't even draft. Everyone mocks me at our draft for not drafting a kicker or a defense. And I'm like, it's just because I'd rather have skill position players. Like, I don't like, I can make the decision on the defense and the kicker later. I'm going to stream them anyway. It doesn't really matter. But it's like, it's the same thing with the tight end position where you can wait until the 13th, 14th, 15th round to get a good tight end. And you don't need to go out and draft Austin Hooper or Darren Waller or even Mark Andrews to have a really good tight end. You know what I mean? Like, you can wait until the later rounds in the draft to do that. And so it's like, for me, in relation to the Hunter Henry situation, like, that's why I would never draft Hunter Henry and I would draft Hawk and Gesicki over them, because I'd rather take the tight end later in the draft. So it's the same thing with Austin Hooper. You're not getting the value back. I don't think he's going to be a good I don't think he's going to produce enough fantasy points to be a good value for your team. But it's not even just that. It's the fact that he's getting drafted far too early at the tight end position for me to even consider it. If he was a 12th, 13th, 14th round pick, I would be all over it. I'd be like, okay, maybe I'll take a flyer. You know what I mean? He might actually be good, but I just don't think there's anything about Austin Hooper. Like, when you look at George Kittle, when you look at, Travis Kelce, even Hawkinson, to some respect, he hasn't had the breakout yet, but, you look at those players and you think they're talented. Like, they're good at tight end. They're good pass catching tight ends. They're good at the position. I look at Austin Hooper and I'm just like, he's got good hands and he's a good blocker. And that's all he is. You know what I mean? He's not a transitional, tight end talent. Like, he's good.
He's
the job done.
Very solid. But yeah, no, he's not like a Travis Kelce. Or
Gets the job done. So he's just never going to be that. And that's why I'm like, I always like to draft for upside, which is why I'll go like Gesicki kind of reminds me a little bit of Hooper. Like I said, the value's there. So I think he could definitely like be like Hooper and break out a little bit in Miami. But as far as like Hawkinson, I think Hawkins top 10 pick. He is a transitional tight end. Like he's in a couple of years, he's going to be like Travis Kelce and George Kittle.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Austin Hooper multiple times on the show.
Yeah.
Kevin Stefanski last year was the offense coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. They used a 2 tight end set, and they ran the ball a lot. That is exactly what they're trying to do in Cleveland. They have Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. They're going to try to pound it down the middle or to the outside, but they're going to run the ball with 2 tight ends, Hooper and Njoku. That's why they didn't want to trade David Njoku.
Yeah.
Even though they have Austin Hooper there, they were saying, well, we're still going to use you on the field. You're still going to be a starter. Both those guys are going to start. They're going to only have 2 wide receiver sets, and they're going to run the ball. Last year, the Vikings had 466 pass attempts. That was awful. That was third. That was 30th in the NFL in passing attempts.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to – I think they'll throw the ball more than that, but how much more than that?
Yeah.
They only threw the ball last year 539 times.
Right.
Which was, I think, like around like 20th in the league in pass attempts. So they're going to throw the ball even less than that this year. There's just not going to be enough targets to go around for Austin Hooper. I think he'll be efficient. You know, he might get some red zone touchdowns. He might get some big third down plays. He's going to be a great player for Cleveland, but he's one of those players that's going to be really good football-wise, but if we're talking fantasy football, he's just not going to be as productive as you're going to want.
Yeah, right. Unless you have any more thoughts on Austin Hooper, let's move on to our final segment for the show, This or That. Boom. I wish I had like an audio track for that.
This or that.
No, Rick was not the voice at the beginning of our podcast, in case you were confused. You were confused. You're like, wow, I didn't know that was Rick's voice. So the first one is Matt Breida, ADP 905, or Jordan Howard, ADP 902. This is an interesting discussion.
This is so tough.
Because I know you took Jordan Howard, and Jordan Howard would be the guy that you would think like is the main back for them.
Matt Breida was off the board in our home league when I took Jordan Howard, actually. But yeah,
really?
I didn't take Jordan Howard.
Yeah. So I think for me personally, I would probably say Breida. I think Jordan Howard's more consistent on field in terms of like not getting hurt and getting consistent production. I think Breida is insanely like good at times, and then sometimes he just disappears into nowhere land. I think for what fits the Miami offense with where they're going, i.e. Tua Tagovailoa, you know, the fast receivers, you know, on the team, and the way they want to play, Matt Breida fits it way more than Jordan Howard does. So I think they're going to try to go RBBC. That would be my expectation. And then Jordan Howard's going to get the goal line work. But there is an opportunity for Breida to come into this offense and be something really good. He's going to be the pass catching back. Jordan Howard's not a great pass catcher, so he's going to pass catch in that offense. If it's an RBBC and he's got pass catching upside, I think Breida gets more opportunity. So I would take Breida over Howard at this point. But you know, I at this point you're splitting hairs. I really don't think either one of them is going to give you any kind of significant difference or upside.
Yeah, I mean, so what I'll say, I actually think they're both worth the risk though, because of the fact that if one of them goes
just
down
don't take both
for each. No. But if one of them goes down for even like COVID, the other is going to be really solid, I think, because of the just surely based on work. Like they might get like 25 to 30 touches a game.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if I have to choose between these two guys, I am probably just going to take Jordan Howard just because he consistently has gotten the carries wherever he's gone. Even in Philly, he got more carries than Miles Sanders right away.
Right.
I think Breida has an injury history as well. I just think he's
Jordan
the safer
Howard
pick.
Jordan Howard is the king of losing his job.
I know. He's the gross safer pick, though. I think he's got the higher floor than Matt Breida.
See, that's my thing, though, is that like in the ninth round, Are you drafting for floor or are you drafting for ceiling? And I feel like all my ninth round picks are ceiling.
It depends
picks.
how my draft went, to be honest, but usually I'm drafting for ceiling. So, I mean, you can make the argument for either. I'm not like crazy about either guy, but I probably, push comes to shove, I would take Jordan Howard, but I absolutely wouldn't blame you if you took Breida.
Yeah, I think I just, sheerly on upside, I'd take Matt Breida.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
I think the next grouping is Mecole Hardman and Sammy Watkins. So Mecole Hardman's ADP 1101, and the ADP for Sammy Watkins is 1302. This one I feel like it should be a relatively easy one, but I wanted to get your thoughts on it. So I would take Hardman. Just once again, upside. I know Watkins is a little bit later in the draft, so it's kind of like easier to take him. And he's probably going to start over Hardman at the beginning of the season. When he's on the field, catching passes from Patrick Mahomes, Sammy Watkins is good. The problem is he can't stay on the field. So obviously you have that problem with him. I've talked about how I think they're going to trade or cut him at some point. I think he's primed to get his job taken from him at some point in the year. And I think Hardman's going to be, is going to take his, essentially just take his job. It depends on how much work they give Hardman, but if he gets like 100 targets, I think he's a decent play in half PPR and standard leagues. In full PPR, he's probably going to finish a lot lower because he's not getting that opportunity. But I think for me, based on sheer upside and the fact that he's just at any given moment he could catch 2 touchdowns in a game and just be ridiculously good, it's Mecole Hardman. Watkins is okay, but
no, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Hardman just takes over the job from Watkins and he wins the job as the starting receiver. But even if that doesn't happen, Watkins has not played a full 16 games since his rookie season.
Right.
Like you said, you think he could get cut or traded. Mm-hmm. I think a perfect fit would be treat him to Green Bay for like a 3rd or 4th round pick.
Oh yeah, that would be a good pick, a good landing spot.
Yeah, but I mean, there's also been some rumors. I mean, they're rumors, so take it with a grain of salt. But I've heard that he's been like kind of frustrated because he wants to stay with Kansas City because he likes to win. But he's been kind of frustrated for not getting the ball a lot. Yeah. So he might want to. I mean, there's an off chance that he requests a trade and goes to a crappy team that needs a wide receiver. So
fair enough.
I mean, there's just a lot of question marks with Sammy Watkins. With Hardman, there's still question marks, but it's more of just the question marks are how many targets he's going to get. Not really the same as is he going to be on the team. Mm-hmm. So I'll take Mecole Hardman.
Okay. Mecole Hardman, I got Breida, you got Howard, this or that, complete. That will complete this episode of the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast, and I believe we cruised in under 30 minutes, which is a new record for us.
Might be.
Don't forget to check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Buy the draft guide, and we'll talk to you tomorrow, Fantasy Champs.
Later.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.